What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be doing the first review roundup that I've done in quite some time. We're in awards season as we're moving to the end of 2024, and between my email inbox being filled with digital screeners from films that came out earlier in the year and films that have yet to come out or films that are about to come out, as well as physical in-person screenings, I have so many things I want to try to watch, and so a couple of things are going to have to get sandwiched together into videos in a bit of a shorter capacity. I won't be able to give all of these reviews as much time, but I still wanted to be able to get some of these reviews out for you guys. So today we're going to be talking about two films, and let's get started on the first one. And it's a film coming from Vertical Entertainment known as The Order. Directed by Justin Kurzel and written by Zach Baylin, this film is based on a novel known as The Silent Brotherhood and stars people like Jude Law, Nicholas Hoult, Ty Sheridan, Mark Maron, Journey Smollett, and many more. So this is an interesting one. It takes us back to the 1980s when there was a group forming known as The Order, who essentially was a white supremacist group. They wanted to make a white supremacist state, and this film in particular focuses on Jude Law as the character of Terry Husk, an FBI agent who's coming into this small town to try to figure out what's going on with a lot of the violence and crime that has started to rise up in this area. And of course, he ends up uncovering this group known as The Order. Alongside him, you have people like Ty Sheridan, who plays the character of Jamie Bowen, another police officer, and as well as Journey Smollett in the mix. And then you have Nicholas Hoult here playing the character of Bob Matthews, who is the leader of this white supremacist group. According to what this film says at the start, it is based on a true story. I did a little bit of research on it afterwards, but I can't necessarily speak to the one for one in terms of what goes on here and how it played out in real life. But this is supposedly based on a true event, and in the 80s, this supposedly was one of the biggest domestic terrorist groups. I had actually not really heard too much about The Order in my life, and so this movie was kind of an introduction to that. What I can say about this movie right out of the gate is it's probably one of my favorite films coming from Vertical Entertainment in quite some time. You have some great actors in here: Jude Law, Nicholas Hoult, Ty Sheridan. Everybody gives a fantastic performance. And on top of that, you also have great cinematography. The look, the feel of the film is really solid. There's a nice eerie score that adds to a lot of moments throughout the course of the film. And I think in a lot of ways, it really depicts some really uncomfortable things and some things that feel all too familiar to what we're seeing today. While this is an extreme case of it, as we're focusing on this group of white supremacists here, it goes without saying that there's still a lot of gnarliness that we've seen that is still in our country all the way up to this day. So I think this is definitely going to be a film that's going to be a sensitive subject depending on who you are. But when it comes down to the filmmaking, I think this is a very well-made film, and I think that all the performances are really solid here. What I do think holds this movie back from being great for me is its pacing. I thought it was a bit of a slow start, but once it picks up and we get into a lot of the big moments, the key moments in this film that really work. There's some great moments of action, there's some great shoot 'em up moments, and in general, there's a pretty interesting cat and mouse police kind of storyline here. But as the movie went on, there was a lot of stopping and starting, and I just felt like it consistently killed the pacing for me, to it leading up to a satisfying ending, but an ending that I genuinely felt like it slowly kind of fizzled out instead of kind of being as exciting as it was earlier in the film. Overall, like I said, I think The Order is a really well-made film, and I do think it's a film that's worth your time. If you're a fan of the cast that's here, I think there's some really great work that's done here on a performance level. I just wish that they would have had a little bit of stronger pacing, and my other biggest gripe would be character development. They do a couple of things here and there to kind of flesh out characters like Jude Law or Ty Sheridan by getting us to understand what their family life is just ever so slightly, but it always feels like it's something that we're alluding to a lot more than it is that was something that we're actually exploring. And that's how I felt about the characters across the board. Even the character of Bob Matthews, played by Nicholas Hoult, I would argue that he is probably the most developed character, as they're trying to give you the understanding of why this character wants to be this white supremacist, why he has the lens that he has, why does he look at the world the way that he does. And I think that Nicholas Hoult really does capture that character well in a very scary way, and I think the film does the most to kind of expand upon his character. But I look at a character like Jude Law's character, who's the main character, he's the FBI hero character in a lot of ways, and he's a tortured soul. He's popping pills throughout the course of the film. He's not necessarily in a great place. They allude to the fact that he's got some trouble going on with his family back home. but they never really dig deeper with any of those things, leaving a lot of the characters in this film to be quite surface level. But for the most part, I found The Order to be a solid watch. I don't think it's anything that's going to blow people away, but I think it's certainly worth your time if you're looking for a pretty good cat and mouse police film that has to do with some pretty relevant things. With all that said, let's move into the next film here for this review roundup, and that is the latest film coming from A24, known as Queer. Directed by Luca Guadagnino, this film is written by Justin Kurtz and is based on a novel by William S. Burroughs and stars people like Daniel Craig, Drew Starkey, Jason Schwartzman, and more. So here we are at the tail end of the year talking about another film from Luca Guadagnino, who directed Challengers earlier in the year, which is a film I really enjoyed. I reviewed it here on the channel. It was one of my earlier reviews on the channel. Looking back on it, it almost feels like it was last year, to be honest. But yeah, I really enjoyed Challengers. So when I saw he had a new film coming out under A24, he had Daniel Craig in the lead role, I was all in. Now, I knew I was in for something with the title being as bold as it is, known as Queer, but I was like, all right, I'm here to check out a good movie. I'm excited. I love this filmmaker. I love the actors involved. So I knew it was going to at least be a good story. And based on some of the posters I saw, it was saying Luca Guadagnino's gay romance, I believe is what I saw, like gay love story. It's pretty much the way that this was marketed on some of the posters. So I thought, you know what, let me check it out. I'm always a sucker for a good romance, a good love story, and you know, I want to make it clear that I'm open to love of all kinds. I'm incredibly open to all kinds of love, and I say this because I thought this movie sucked. Honestly, this is a movie that I thought was just not good. I was so surprised. And when it comes down to this director, Luca is somebody who is fairly divisive as a director already. So I do 100% recognize that there's probably going to be people who watch this and love it and think I'm completely in the wrong. I have seen other films of his that I haven't loved as much as others, but he's a director I have a lot of admiration for. But in the case of Queer, I think that there are things about this film that really work, but it's more on the filmmaking side of things. Quickly before we get into the rest of my thoughts, the base premise of this film is it focuses on Daniel Craig as the character of William Lee, who used to be in the military and is now in Mexico City. He's in his late 40s. He's a lot lonelier. He's got substance abuse issues now. He's drinking a lot, and he doesn't really have a lot going on in his life. That's when he ends up meeting a younger man played by Drew Starkey, the character of Eugene Allerton, and he ends up immediately kind of falling for this young guy and tries to build this relationship with him. And over the course of the film, they have a will they, won't they kind of romance in a way as they kind of explore each other and explore friendship. And there's a bunch of other things that start to play out. I don't want to spoil the film for anybody who's interested in going into it blind. With that said though, what I can start this off by saying in terms of my positives is I think that the film is very well made. When you have a director like Luca Guadagnino, you know that you're going to have really solid filmmaking. The cinematography is great. There's great musical score throughout the course of the film that really adds to a lot of the moments in the film. The overall performances throughout the entirety of the film from Daniel Craig and from Drew Starkey, I think, are great. The supporting cast of people like Jason Schwartzman, great as well. There's some great use of miniatures and some special effects that are actually really nice and blend seamlessly in the film. There are some trippy sequences where some of those visual effects are kind of utilized that I thought were really effective. And when it comes down to the overall production of this film, I was really impressed, especially them filming in Mexico City. A lot of the locations that were used just lended themselves to being a very beautiful looking film to see on the big screen. I got to see it on a big screen in the theaters at a screening. And I say all of this to just say, after all of those elements, what you really have here for me is a really hollow and just very pretentious in a lot of ways art house picture that felt to me like softcore gay porn. And I am inclusive of all kinds of people. I have praised so many films that have gay characters at the center. None of that bothers me. So by no means am I some heterosexual guy here that's like, ugh, gay movie. I don't care. That much I don't care about at all. I went into this hoping for a good romantic story, a romantic period piece drama. This film takes place in the 50s. That's what it says in the synopsis, that it's, you know, this period piece drama, romance film. And I was like, all right, cool. Let me see what Luca brings to the mix here. And it just felt like a film that ultimately felt aimless, and I never really felt any chemistry between the characters played by Daniel Craig and Drew Starkey. The two characters are at odds a lot of times in the film, and when it comes down to Daniel Craig's character, he's ultimately just a horn dog who is kind of creepy for majority of the film. It feels like he wants to liquor up this younger guy to get his pants off, and majority of the film is honestly Daniel Craig drinking and smoking, getting high on his own supply, and trying to suck this young guy off. And then they would have their moments where romance kind of kicks in, but it never really feels like there's chemistry. It just feels like it's more scandalous than it is romantic. And then shortly after, Drew Starkey's character Eugene wants nothing to do with Daniel Craig, and they kind of do that same kind of thing over and over and over again, which ultimately led to me as just being a very just wishy-washy movie. On one hand, I felt like the film was trying to say something about the experience of homosexuals in their lives. On another hand, when it comes down to things like the substance abuse and kind of the cyclical life cycle that Daniel Craig's character is in, it felt like it had something to say about the self-destructive nature of things like living in a cycle, doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result, having things like substance abuse, those different kinds of things. When the film was leaning into those moments, I started to see a message, I started to see theming that I could connect to. But as the film played out, I ultimately just kept thinking to myself, what are we doing here? Because if you look at what the first act is, and you look at what the second act is, and then you look at what the third act is, and then you look at what the epilogue is, it just never feels like there's a through line. It feels like the characters are consistently without chemistry and never really feels like there's a romantic edge. I was never rooting for the characters on a romantic level here. Sure, there's some scandalous sex that I'm sure will turn some people on who watch this film and find it to be risque, but for me, it lacked any sort of substance and ultimately made for what I genuinely can just call a hollow, pretentious art house flick that feels like softcore porn. And that's really what it felt like to me. There really wasn't much to this film. And I was surprised to see somebody like Daniel Craig in this film because he's a fantastic actor and I think he gives a fantastic performance here, but I think it's wasted on a film that I don't really think it knows what it's trying to say. I think a lot of people are going to walk out of this movie kind of scratching their heads. I'm sure plenty of people will walk out of this film saying, this is what the film's trying to say, you missed the whole mark. And maybe there's a part of this film that I missed, but it just didn't connect with me. I just felt like the characters were unlikable for majority of the film, and even when they have likable, charming moments, they're fleeting. And so that's gonna be my thoughts on Queer, to be honest, and that's gonna be my thoughts in general on The Order and Queer. These are two films that are wildly different, but if you were to ask me which of these two should you check out, definitely check out The Order. I think it's a much better film. It's exciting to watch at times. It's got really solid performances, and it kind of touches on some pretty relevant things that we still see in the modern day. When it comes down to Queer, I just think it's a movie that's not going to please many. I think it's a film that is maybe being marketed in a certain way with this very bold title to kind of bring people in, and ultimately just does for me, what is the biggest cardinal sin, which is just have an aimless, pointless narrative that never really feels like it comes to any sort of fruition and left me feeling unsatisfied. So definitely looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. So hit that like button if you guys enjoyed the video. Comment your thoughts down below. Where do you agree with me? Where do you disagree with me? Are you planning to check out either of these films? Whatever the case may be, I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.